Somehow, both Johnny Zull and Bill McIntosh found the strength to keep on going, so Simon felt it behooved him to do the same. Against his better judgment, he got out of bed on Saturday morning, he hadn't been planning to, and went down to his basement studio. There sat Subway Breakdown, a reminder that he could still paint, even though he was a washout at everything else. He didn't particularly feel like going to the cultural center. Wendy would probably be there, and staying away from her was number one on his new list of priorities. He went, though, head high, and found to his surprise that Wendy was not there. She seemed the only one who wasn't. Good coverage in local press and even the New York papers, coupled with a keen interest in high school talent and a healthy dislike of Interflux, had combined to bring a large crowd to Interflux's doorstep. Straight from 10 to 3, the center's Saturday hours, a steady stream of visitors packed the Interflux tent and surrounding land, where, due to continuing good weather, further exhibits had been set up outside. TC's stage band performed behind the tent near the Worm store, alternating with a student playing ragtime piano. At various points during the day, poetry students gave short readings, and groups of actors performed vignettes from classical and modern theater. It took until 3:30 to clear so many people off the property, by which time it was discovered that Interflux had pulled in over $300 in donations. This was strange because there was no donation box. But a senior specializing in decorative pottery had a large replica of an ancient Greek vase on display, and today's satisfied patrons had literally stuffed it with cash. "This is great," Phil crowed. "If this keeps up, we'll be able to stay open all year." He and Simon remained at the center to clean up the tent and lock up until exhibitions would reopen on Monday afternoon. Naturally, the first thing Phil wanted to know was how the big date with Wendy had gone. "Put it this way," Simon said grimly. "At 1:30 in the morning, I was in my garage sitting on the wood pile with Zoll, and it was a lot less aggravating than the stuff that came before it. Get the picture?" Phil looked disgusted. "You mean to tell me that after all my advice and coaching, you struck out?" "I didn't strike out," Simon said defensively. "I got sick of her company, so I took her home." "Sick of her company? What kind of talk is that? This is a date, not a discussion group. You've been moaning about this girl for months." "Well, I'll tell you one thing. I won't moan about her anymore. I don't want to hear another word about Wendy Orr." Phil shook his head in disillusionment. "I can't believe it. I spend hours bestowing my own personal secret wisdom on you so that your date can go well, and somehow you blow it and make me look like an idiot. What did you do? Poppy seeds in the teeth? I bet it was poppy seeds in the teeth." "It wasn't poppy seeds in the teeth," Simon exclaimed in annoyance. "If you must know, she said rotten things about my friends." Phil clutched at his head. "That's it? You dumped her for that? You clod, they're supposed to say rotten things about your friends. It's traditional, like not swinging at the first pitch." Simon glared at him. "I feel much better now. Thanks for the understanding." They finished straightening up the exhibits, and Phil fastened the 3 large padlocks to the door of the tent. "I still feel cheated," he said as they began to walk to their cars. "I came here expecting to hear stories that would..." "Drop it, Phil." Phil sighed. "At least you didn't get boyfriend syndrome. By the way, did I mention the patient called me up last night?" Simon stopped walking. "Who, Sam? Anything important?" Phil shrugged. "It was kinda weird. I'm figuring Carrot Top wants to go somewhere and he needs the rec, but no, he just wants to talk. Only neither of us has anything to say. So he starts asking me all these questions about Interflux and what's been going on lately, which is stuff he already knows. But get this, he doesn't chew me out or moan and groan or anything. He just listens. Freaky, huh?" Simon started walking again. "Freaky." Although it was the last week in November, the weather stayed unseasonably mild, and there was no need for the emergency heaters that had come with the tent. Denver was under 4 feet of snow, blizzards racked the Midwest, both Boston and Washington had storms, but Phil's faith formed a protective umbrella over the New York metropolitan area. The cultural center prospered and attendance was steady as people came from all over to see what Nassau Arts had to offer. Even Phil was surprised that the Sunday papers had mentioned the center again, and the Sun critic had commented, "A professional caliber exhibition, tent and worm store notwithstanding." Success was almost assured. The only casualty of the cultural center was, ironically, the worm store. Stuck out behind the tent as it was, it received almost no attention, just the occasional passing chuckle. With only a week of November worms left, business was down to zero, excepting, of course, Jedediah Odell, who felt the cultural center was irrelevant. The demise of the worm store would have passed unnoticed had it not been for Dave Roper, who absorbed each new day of no business like a blow to the head with a battle axe. Once again, he was the butt of jokes as he lobbied for more publicity, a better location, and even a booth inside the main tent. This time, the abuse Dave took was so obvious that even he was aware something was not right. And so he sought help from Simon Irving because he was such a well-respected, level-headed guy. "Simon, is there something wrong with me?" Dave asked, while Simon wondered why this was happening again. "I mean, I'm the only guy out of the whole store who cares about the worm store. Now, you're a person whose opinion I can really go by. Tell me the truth. Is it stupid to love the worm store?" Simon squirmed. What could he say? Of course it was stupid to love the worm store. "Well, you can love anything you want. This is a free country." "I know that, but is it stupid if it's a worm store you love?" Simon sighed. "Look, Dave, I don't know what to tell you." There it was again. If painting didn't pan out, Simon might still be able to avoid a career in Interflux by opening a plush office on Central Park West and charging people $100 an hour to hear him say, "I don't know what to tell you." If he was going to be the public access guru, he might as well turn a profit. With Subway Breakdown ready and bound for greatness, the cultural center practically running itself, and worries about women all a thing of the past, well, until next time, Simon was able to turn his attention to his other classes. Things were looking up on the academic scene. Even his art history class, where it had once looked like he was about to take the fall with Mr. Monagole's "Don't worry, no problem" still ringing in his ears, he was staying afloat. His D average wasn't pretty, but it was a pass, and with TC's help, he'd be able to shake off probation and put Mr. Monagole and his soil erosion behind him. On the other end of the spectrum, he was running 3 A's. This was no surprise in design and composition, but in English it was totally unexpected. With the energy obstructing furniture gone from the classroom, the psychic growth was flying all over the place, and Xerxes Buzz Durham seemed to think that some of it had settled on Simon. Luckily, psychic growth had many of the same characteristics as aggravation, which put Simon at the top of his class, head and shoulders above the rest. The 3rd A, however, was a stunner. He and Johnny Zoll were the top pair in biology. Naturally, this was impossible, since the only experiment they'd completed all year was the one that proved Simon's shoes performed photosynthesis more efficiently than any of the plant samples. Apparently, Ms. Glanfield was so devoted to the attack on Interflux that as top pair, she picked the only 2 names she recognized. Certainly, there was no time to grade lab work, as she now spent most of her time at home with a bad back, which she had acquired during her bit trying to dig worms. From there, she launched a last massive letter-writing campaign against the enemy. This left only math, which was going to be a nuisance again, for that week, the homework tool succumbed to slow decay and simply ceased to be. At 17 members, it now comprised more than half the class, and the sheer confusion of the morning copy session was more than the whole business was worth. On Monday morning, a brawl nearly erupted, after which every single ex-member told Phil what he could do with his pool as the 15 of them filed out the study hall door. What a lousy break, Phil muttered. And just when I need the extra time for innovative arts, too. I could be in for some trouble there. But Phil, I thought you said you were doing really well, Simon protested. Phil shrugged. I may have been kind of premature on that one. You see, I'm really great at innovative, but I'm kind of short on arts. Coperdrick said Banana Surprise was a good try, but I don't think he was too crazy about Technicolor Wheat. If I can really blow him away with my next project, I should be cool. If not, he shrugged again. Interflux said nothing on the subject of the Interflux Cultural Center. Company officials would not speak to reporters regarding it, nor would Cyril Irving mention it to his son as the two snuck hamburgers behind Mrs. Irving's back. It was as though the new conflict didn't exist. Even more perplexing to Simon was that his father had quite suddenly become the world's most considerate dad. No longer was he argumentative or resentful, and at the club his killer instincts seemed to have cooled. Simon could have sworn that his father let him win their last one-on-one basketball game. Also, Mr. Irving had taken to slipping Simon a little extra spending money, backsliding on his own rule that youngsters must learn to budget. Most disconcerting of all, his father was suddenly taking a keen interest in the Vishnik Prize and in Simon's work, and Abercrombie Prep was virtually dropped from conversation. Simon couldn't help thinking that all this new treatment was in some way connected to Interflux and the Cultural Center. But how? Surely it couldn't be that Interflux was admitting defeat over Lot 1346B. Or could it? Certainly the press stated in no uncertain terms that the Cultural Center was a major triumph. Still, Interflux losing, it just didn't compute. He found the summons taped to his locker on Tuesday morning. Nathan Krupman requires your participation in his Nassau Arts Video Film Omni tonight at 6 p.m. He gave an address in a remote section of Brooklyn and instructed everyone to ignore the tow-away zone signs as they were enforced very rarely. Simon smiled. Well, here it was. Finally, he had gotten a part in Nathan's movie. Now he would be able to see what everyone else was so excited about. It had to be a good part, too, since Nathan said he'd been saving it up just for Simon. But he looked in the envelope. Where were his lines? Nathan had forgotten to include his lines. He frowned. If his role was as important as Nathan said it was going to be, there'd be an awful lot of lines. Too many of him to learn without at least a few hours of practice. He found TC in his office in front of locker 0750 and briefed him on the emergency. The agent was unperturbed. Don't worry, Simon. Nathan never forgets anything. If he didn't provide a script, it means it wasn't necessary, and there are probably just a couple of lines that you can learn on the spot. But Nathan personally assured me this was going to be a major part, Simon pointed out. TC shrugged. If he says so, then it is. There just aren't many lines, that's all. Faint indications of that gnawing feeling which signified that something was not quite right began to bud in Simon's stomach. He fought them down. Yeah, the shoot was probably going to be a high-action, low-dialogue scene. He was playing the part of a grim but able hero, the strong, silent type. After all, it was well known that Nathan Krupman always lived up to his word. Sam Stavrinidis also had a part in tonight's shoot. Sam had lines. I have a action part, Simon explained as the gnawing feeling returned. Phil needed the wreck that night, so Simon and Sam drove to Brooklyn in the Firebird. The rush hour traffic was bumper to bumper, but finally they pulled into the tow-away zone in front of the address that indicated in the summons. It was a partially burnt-out multi-level warehouse bearing a faded sign that read, Calvin Fitzcart and Company Wholesale Corsets. The shoot was taking place in the main storage area where abruptly the dilapidated warehouse ended and deep space began. All around were placed various sets depicting the surface of planets, the interiors of spaceships and stations, and an enormous communications tower that shot up 3/4 of the way to the huge storeroom's 100-foot ceiling, gleaming against the star-speckled void of intergalactic space. Everywhere organized chaos reigned, with Nathan at the center radiating competence. He darted around, giving directions and talking a mile a minute, but his expression was calm and collected. And it was obvious that he had everything under control. Simon was anxious to talk to Nathan to clear up this whole lines issue, but on the bustling set, Nathan was completely inaccessible. Soon Simon was whisked off to wardrobe and makeup. There, a large group of students was being outfitted in dashing spacesuits and being issued futuristic-looking laser guns, communicators, and other equipment. Simon was in a spacesuit too, but his was mutilated, charred, bloodstained, and dirty. "Your life pod was just hit by an anti-proton plutonium torpedo," explained Bob Lawrence, who was in charge of the costumes for the shoot. "You're lucky to be alive. Okay, makeup, you need several radiation burns." Bob's girlfriend, Grace, hustled Simon into a chair and made his face and hands match his suit. When he viewed his finished self in the mirror, Simon was profoundly shocked. Maybe this was Nathan's idea of the after effects of an anti-proton plutonium torpedo, but in his own eyes, he looked like he'd been run over by a train. His face was scarred and bloody, his hair was matted with filth and mud. His eyes peered bleakly out of this arrangement like the headlights of a Jeep in a sandstorm. He reflected in some annoyance that he would never get any glory for this major part in Omni, since the person in the film was going to be totally unrecognizable as Simon Irving. A freshman girl serving as chief production assistant told Simon to follow her, so he presumed he'd finally get his chance to meet with Nathan. But instead, she led him into a small, bare room and told him to wait until she was called. But I have to see Nathan," Simon protested. "There's a problem with my life. Nathan's very busy. Your scene doesn't come up until much later. Don't worry, I'll come for you when it's time. Just make sure you don't leave this room." She walked out and shut the door, leaving Simon seething and sweating in his spacesuit. He examined his surroundings. He was sitting in a white box with a wooden table and chair and a bare light bulb hanging from the ceiling. On the table was a large fruit bowl which contained a single sickly pear. His stomach growled. He'd missed dinner in order to make it here on time for this wonderful shoot. He seated himself down and wolfed down the pear. Half an hour went by as Simon did a slow burn. The nerve of that Nathan Krutman! Who did he think he was, playing around with the valuable time of the head of Interflux? A horrible thought occurred to him. This was all a practical joke, and he had no part in Omni. Everyone had gone home, leaving him waiting in a deserted warehouse in Brooklyn. They'd taken his clothes, too, and his wallet, and his car, so he'd have to present himself at the nearest police station, looking like he'd just been hit by an anti-proton plutonium torpedo. In a panic, he left the room, went through the deserted makeup area, opened the studio door a crack, and peered out. There was a full-fledged planetary war going on, involving no fewer than 60 or 70 spacesuited troops as Nathan's 5 portable cameras panned around, recording the action. Suddenly he heard Nathan's voice shout, "Cut! Cut! Hold it! Where's that light coming from?" Quickly, Simon ducked back inside and shut the door. But even from makeup, he could hear Nathan yelling, "Don't open that door! Come on, Simon! We're trying to make a movie here!" Simon slunk back to his box, muttering, "Yes, Mr. Director, sir. Whatever you say, Mr. Director, sir. Drop dead, Mr. Director, sir." The temperature inside Calvin Fitzgarten Company was in the high 70s, leading to a temperature inside Simon's spacesuit of 95. The shoot was delayed another 45 minutes because of his unfortunate intrusion into the last scene, so by the time the freshman girl showed up to fetch the star, Simon was close to collapse. Bathed in sweat, he sat gnawing on the denuded core of the pear. "Okay," Nathan was announcing as Simon was led onto the main set. "This is the big one, people. The very last scene. And it's absolutely important that we get it in one take. Here comes our star. How's you holding up, Simon?" "Nathan, I never got a copy of my lines." "You've got no lines, Simon. We're doing the last scene with nothing but the music Johnny Soul's writing for us. So I'll be able to talk you through this and tell you exactly what to do. But now pay attention. You're the last man left alive in the universe, which is going to end in a few minutes. Everywhere, planets, whole solar systems are blowing up. And here you are, half dead, on this isolated planetoid at the edge of the galaxy, waiting for the end. Now, I've got 15 special effects people on this, so there's going to be a lot of fireworks out there. I mean, the universe is ending, right? There's no script, Simon. Just do exactly what I say, and never look in my direction or at any other cameras. Okay, stage crew, put him in the destroyed life pod! Too tired to argue, Simon allowed himself to be stuffed into a large pile of rubble right near the base of the big tower on the central set. The scene was cleared, the lights adjusted, and Nathan called, "Action!" The cameras clicked on, and the beta cassettes began rolling in their decks. Okay, slowly lift yourself out of the life pod. That's it. Now stand up. Not too fast. That's the way. As Simon rose, there was a blinding quadruple flash explosion coming from space over his right shoulder. Involuntarily, he threw himself flat on the ground. "Good reaction," called Nathan. "I hadn't thought of that, but it looked great. Yeah, that was a nearby solar system exploding. Now, you get up. You see the crashed spaceship over by the meteorite crater, and you recognize it. You're shocked. It belongs to the woman you love, who's been separated you for the last 7 years. You rush over to the ship and open the door." Simon tried to run, but found himself stumbling because of the bulky spacesuit, his own hunger and dehydration, and the roughness of the terrain. Explosions were going off all over as the universe approached its end, and he realized with a shudder that if one of Nathan's special effects people made the slight miscalculation, more than just a few little planets could get blown up here. "Great acting!" Nathan encouraged. "The stumbling seems so real. Now, don't fall into the crater. Open the hatch of the ship where you find the woman you love still alive. Come on, Simon. Put some muscle into it. My grandmother could open that door." Finally, Simon succeeded in wrenching the door open, and there she was, the woman he loved. She was made up to look almost as disheveled as he was, but there was no mistaking it. He was looking at Wendy Orr. "Love it!" crowed Nathan as Simon stared. "Cameras 2 and 5, move in! Simon, gently lift her out of the ship." Simon's mind raced. This was Wendy! If he touched her, she'd slaughter him. He stared into her eyes, but her expression was inscrutable. Experimentally, he grasped her shoulders, and when she didn't hit him, he lifted her out of the ship and laid her carefully on the ground. "Oh, beautiful!" Nathan shrieked. "You really look like you feel it. Okay, she's gonna die, and you both know it. So you take her in her arms and tell her that you love her. Come on, Simon, do it now. She's gonna die any minute." For art, thought Simon, but as he held her close, he had a great surge of feeling about how this was Wendy, and how much he liked her, and how stupid he'd been to kick her out of his car. Even an idiot would have the brains not to throw away a third chance. She said she wouldn't have anything to do with him if he was the last man in the universe. Well, now he was. Surely she could make an exception. "I'm really sorry about what happened Friday night," he whispered into her ear as Nathan screamed at his cameraman for more close-ups. "Simon, not here," she whispered back. "I don't know what came over me. We were having such a good time. The movie was lousy, but everything else was good. I'm so sorry." "Stop it," she hissed. "You're ruining Nathan's movie." Nathan was standing up on his director's chair, howling like a man. Great! Okay, Simon, kiss her!" It was the cardinal rule of Nassau Arts. You always did what Nathan told you. He kissed her as planets, solar systems, and galaxies vaporized all around them. And Simon knew that the force of the anti-proton plutonium torpedo that had leveled his life pod was a wet Roman candle by comparison. Suddenly, Nathan's voice reached him. "Okay, Wendy, die!" And she went limp in his arms. Involuntarily, Simon sprang up to make an angry gesture at Nathan, but he lost his footing and tumbled backwards down into the crater. "Beautiful, Simon! Now, when you climb back out, I want to see the pain and anger of your loss. Camera 5, get ready for an extreme close-up!" Simon hoisted himself out of the crater, completely shaken. "Okay, Simon, here's the hard part. Forget Wendy, she's history, and you're about to be history too. I want you to run over to the tower and climb up the ladder to the very top. There you stand, the last survivor of the human race, defiant to the end, and you shake your fist in anger at the whole universe!" In a daze, Simon staggered to the base of the tower and looked up. In his present condition, there was no way he was going to make it to the top. Well, he'd followed Nathan this far, and he wasn't turning back now. He climbed. As the explosions and flashes went on all around him and the starry sky turned into a huge fireball, he climbed, hanging on for dear life, giddy images of Wendy spinning in his head. All the way to the top, he fought fatigue, hunger, emotional upheaval, and the discomfort of his suit, until finally, weak with exhaustion, he pulled himself onto the small platform at the pinnacle. Here it was, the end of Omni, the climax, the key scene to the whole business. And a stupid movie it was too if Simon Irving was any judge. But even so, no one would ever say that the head of Interflux hadn't done his bit for the almighty Nathan. He was going to give Nathan an ending that would bring the house down. Rearing back, he raised both arms to the exploding heavens and bellowed with all the rage and defiance he could muster. "All right," cried Nathan far below, "blow it!" A blinding flash sliced through the blackness, and 16 columns of flame rose up around the tower. In horrified disbelief, Simon felt the platform give way beneath him. "Nathan!" Simon hurtled through the air towards certain death, his whole life flashing before his eyes in disjointed lightning visions. 70 feet he fell, his one thought that Nathan was so crazy that he'd kill to get an ending for his movie. He hit the net 10 feet from the floor and bounced sickeningly for a few agonized moments. The whole set was covered with smoke, and he began choking as he floundered in vain to get out of the net. "Cut! That's a wrap! Clean up, crew!" In a matter of seconds, the smoke was fanned away and the lights turned on, revealing the cast and crew of Omni cheering and congratulating their director. Instead of killing the little... "Hey, Simon!" called Nathan from amidst his admirers. "Are you all right over there?" Simon saw red, and before he knew it, he was up out of the net and had Nathan by the collar up against the nearest wall. "Why, you homicidal maniac! Think about it! I could be dead right now! He could have killed me!" Simon babbled, trembling up against his cracked cup with a combination of shock and rage. Anxious to get Simon away from the set, Sam had led him to the nearest coffee, which was available in a dingy diner across the street from the Calvin Fitzhart building. "He's a lunatic! He should be locked up! He's so obsessed with that dumb movie of his that he's lost his regard for human life! What he did to me was attempted murder! You can't get away with that in America, can you?" "Hey, pal!" called the counterman, a lumberjack type with a beer belly and a tattoo on his right arm that said Brooklyn. "Calm down, everything's gonna be okay." Simon lowered his voice, which did nothing to reduce his agitation. "He dynamited me off a building! That's not movie making, that's guerrilla warfare! Sam, are you listening to me?" Sam had become distant, lost in his own thoughts. "Simon," he said seriously, "I have to talk to you about Barbara." "Barbara? Barbara!" That was another sore point. Simon never wanted to think about women again as long as he lived, which was going to be a long time, since he had also resolved to steer clear of Nathan Krupman. After he'd calmed down from his attempt to strangle the director, he'd ransacked the set in search of Wendy, but she had left right after the shoot, possibly without even bothering to find out whether he was dead or alive. "I've just been hit with guerrilla warfare, and you want to talk about Barbara?" "I've got to get rid of her." Simon was instantly distracted. "Get rid of Barbara?" "Why don't you dynamite her off a building?" wisecracked the counterman. They ignored him. "She's a nice enough girl, Simon, but I'm dying of loneliness with her because when you go out with Barbara, that's all you do. You don't go out yourself. You don't go out with friends. You don't even think on your own. It's driving me crazy. I thought everything was working out great between you two." "That's another thing about going out with Barbara. Everything else to be working out great, even if it isn't. I don't like it that much. Having a girlfriend is overrated. It's not very good." "Women," said the counterman philosophically. "You can't live with them and you can't live without them." Sam shook his head. I'm so out of everything. I feel like I've been on a deserted island. I hardly ever see you guys anymore, and when I do, it's just hi, bye. And I know I complained a lot, but I liked being in on all the Interflux things. Do you realize I never even saw the worm store? Must have got by me too, said the counterman thoughtfully, but I don't get out of Brooklyn much. We were in Burger King the other day, Sam went on, and Dino and Bill were a few booths down. Bill was going to try to sink an onion ring into a hanging flower pot across the room, and I knew they had at least a couple of hundred thou on the line. I was dying to be in it, but I was with Barbara, and she wouldn't have understood. It's gotten to the point where I never have any fun anymore. And on top of it all, I'm not enjoying my painting either. You saw my Vishnik entry. It's zero. It's a zero. I've just got to get out of this relationship. It's making me feel, strangled. The counterman was refilling their cups, and also one for himself as he pulled up a chair. Yeah, strangled. Well, Sam, I don't know what to tell you, said Simon lamely. I do, the counterman put in eagerly. You go to Barbara and you tell her like this. Nothing against you, I just don't like the life. End it nicely, but end it. Simon snapped his fingers. Yeah, I agree with Jake, said the counterman. Jake's right, agreed Sam, nodding slowly. Well, I steer you wrong, said Jake, beaming into both of their faces. And if that don't work, you know, use guerrilla warfare. Hey, you guys feel like a couple of donuts?